I think of all the topics around recruiting, hiring, and how you're managing workforces, there's been so much written about this. I go up and down this because a lot of it is actually suitable at a point in time in a market. When you talk about hiring and recruiting, you're dipping into a labour market, a labour pool in all essence. So you can only hire and recruit what's in the pool. So that there's all sorts of people out there and who will sort of say, hold out until you get the best person you can and set your standards high. And there are genuine issues around culture, around fit, around other bits and pieces. At the end of the day, if you've got 40 hours a week of work that need to be done in order to fulfill a contract, you just have to get the person that can do that. One of my more favourite books, if you've been listening to this, I mentioned before, was The E-Myth by Gerber. And he always talks about, a lot of that book is about process and procedure. He talks about, if you have a business that needs rocket scientists, you're in trouble because there's not very many of them. They're very expensive. So implement good process and procedures so you can get the least paid person to do the appropriate work. So now that could be a rocket scientist. I doubt it. So you have to dip into a labour pool. So you have to find the people who are willing to work for you, who are willing to work for what you're paying, who are available in your mode of work, be if it's face-to-face and in a more traditional environment, or is it online, for example. So a lot goes into it. So getting a perfect match with respect to staff is hard. So if you have to line up culture and attitude and then their wage, do they want to work from home, et cetera, there's a lot there to get right. It will come down to what you can afford to do for what you need to do. But at the end of the day, if you need to employ staff to fulfill contracts, you will just need to do that. In that case, you need better systems to manage those staff. There's lots of very good HR management platforms out there. An Australian one called Employment Hero is one that comes to mind, but there's lots. It will depend on the market, the industry you're in. Getting hiring right's important. It's very flippant. You should be very careful. When you fire a person, you are basically putting them out of work. And that has all sorts of consequences for that person and probably yourself if you're a human being. So you should hire appropriately. A lot of people sort of say hire slow, fire fast. I think you should hire appropriately and you should fire appropriately at the same time. So be very, very cognizant of that. But in general, you're dipping into a labour pool to do tasks that you need done. I mean, have that guide your actions amongst all the other constraints you have for your business. So a lot of people want to bring in a co-founder. So a co-founder is a person who may come into the business. But if a co-founder is coming in and they're buying into the business, it usually means they're injecting capital or they're buying some of your shares from you at the same time. A co-founder, in my opinion, really should have an equity tied to the business. And that's not a free grant of equity. Probably unless they're sacrificing a large part of their salary with respect to shares. And equity share plans and employee share option plans are a whole new thing that you should research properly. Needless to say, not needless to say, but it is somewhat easier to fire an employee than it is to remove a shareholder. So if your co-founder has ended up being a shareholder, you just can't take those shares off them. That's sort of confiscation of property. It's a whole new box and dice. So be exceptionally aware. Issues I'd look at around co-founder is what complementary skills do you bring? If you're weak in tech, for example, and they're strong in tech, you might be strong in tech and they're strong in sales. There's two sort of instant matches you can look at there, for example. Business is a long journey. It's very rarely is only a couple of years. It's a long journey. It's someone you have to be prepared to stay with for a long, long time, get along with, professionally trust, and be willing to run this enterprise together. There's a lot to take into account when hiring a co-founder. Think very long and hard about it.